Hello everyone, welcome to my science class of grade 4. My name is Teacher Ronald Nyakana and my topic for today is plants. Again, plants. Now let us spell the word plants. P-L-A-N-T-S. Plants. Now under plants we are going to look at the different classification of plants. Now usually plants are classified into two major groups. And these two major groups include number one, non-flowering plants. Again, non-flowering plants. Group number two are what we call flowering plants. Again, flowering plants. Now let us try to differentiate between non-flowering plants and flowering plants. Let us start with group number one, and that is what we call non-flowering plants. Now, what are non-flowering plants? Non-flowering plants are plants that do not produce flowers. Flowers, they were dogma. Instead of producing flowers, they produce what we call spores or cones for reproduction. Now, examples of non-flowering plants are number one, moss. Again, moss. Number two, fern. Again, fern. Number three, conifer. Again, conifer. One more time, moss, fern, conifer. Now, all these plants do not produce flowers. Instead, they produce spores or cones for reproduction. Now, let us look at the second group of plants, and that is what we call flowering plants. Again, flowering plants. Now, what are flowering plants? Flowering plants are plants that have flowers. So, any plant that has flowers is called a flowering plant. Now, the flowers produce the fruits and the seeds. Fruits pewa polamai. Now let us look at the parts of a flowering plant. Part number one is leaf. Again, leaf. Number two, fruit. Again, fruit. What we are seeing here is a fruit. Number three, flower. Again, flower. What we are seeing here in yellow is what we call a flower. Ewa dogma. Number four, stem. Again, stem. Number five, root. Again, root. One more time, leaf, fruit, flower, stem, root. Now, let us proceed and look at the different functions of each of the parts of a flowering plant. And we are going to start with the root. Now, the main function of the roots is to absorb water and minerals. One more time, absorb water and minerals. Function number two, the roots also provide support. When we talk about support, this is what we talk about. If at all the plant is firm in the ground or in the soil, it is the root that provides support to the plant by anchoring the plant to the soil. Now, we have two types of roots. Root type number one are what we call tap roots. Now, tap roots usually have this main root that we call the tap root and other smaller roots. Category number two are what we call fibrous roots. Again, fibrous roots. Now, fibrous roots don't have a tap root, that is the main root. Instead, they have smaller roots that are penetrating into the ground. Part number two is a stem. Now, this is a stem. Now, the function of a stem is to transport water, minerals, and food to the other parts of the plant. Now, the stem is the one that transports our water, food, and other minerals to other parts of the plant, such as the leaves, the fruit, and the seeds. Number 3 is the leaf. If it is one, it is called a leaf. If there are many, they are called leaves. Now, let us look at the functions of the leaves. Now, the functions of the leaves are to capture sunlight. When we talk about sunlight, it is the light that comes from the sun. So the leaves are the ones that capture the sunlight and make food for the plant. So plants with green leaves, green pewasik yao. Usually plants that have green leaves have what we call chlorophyll that captures sunlight. Part number 4 are what we call flowers. Again, flowers. Now, the main function of the flower is to reproduce. Now, when we talk about reproduction, these are usually the parts of the plant that usually make the seeds. Now, let us look at the common flower parts. Now, usually the flower parts are usually divided into what we call the male reproductive system and the female reproductive system. So what we are seeing here is what we call the male reproductive system, and that is called the stamen. On this side are what we call the female reproductive system, and this is what we call the pistil. We are going to look at each of these parts and the function of each. Now, part number 1, which is the male reproductive system, is what we call the stamen. And the stamen usually has what we call the anther. This is what we call the anther. Part number 2 under the male reproductive system is what we call the filament. Again, filament. Now, the filament is the one that supports the anther. Next are petal. Again, petals. Now, these are usually the bright colored. These are usually brightly colored, and they are usually the ones that attract, for example, the bees to come and pollinate our flower. Next is sepal. Again, sepal. What we are seeing here is what we call a sepal. Now let us move on and look at the female reproductive part of the flower. Under the female reproductive part of the flower, which is called the pistil, we have part number 1, which is very important to our flower, and that is called the ovary. Now, the ovary usually is the one that produces the ovules. Next is the style. Again, the style. This is what we call the style. Number 3, stigma. Again, stigma. One more time. Stamen, anther, filament, petal, sepal, ovary, style, stigma, and this is all called a pistil. Now let us proceed and look at the functions of each part of the flower in details. Let us start with the male parts and the functions of the male parts of the flower. First is the stamen. Now when we talk about a stamen, this is a stamen. And the stamen is usually the male reproductive part of a flower. Now the stamen usually includes 2 parts. The first one is the anther. And the anther is the one that produces pollen grains which develop the sperm. Part number 2 under the male parts of the flower is the filament. Now the filament looks just like the stem of a plant, but instead this one is inside the flower. And this one is the one that supports the anther. Next, let us look at the female parts of a flower and the functions of each part. Number 1, pistil. Again, pistil. Now, when we talk about pistil, pistil is the female reproductive part of the flower. Now, this is our pistil, and the pistil usually has 4 main parts. Part number 1 is a stigma. Again, stigma. Now, when we talk about a stigma usually includes what we call sticky pollen. And the sticky pollen is usually the receptive part of the pistil. Number 2, style. Again, style. Now, a style is usually the stalk of the pistil down which the pollen tube grows. Now, as you can see, this is the tube that we are talking about. Number 3, ovary. Again, ovary. Now, this is our ovary. What you're seeing here is our ovary. And the ovary usually contains the ovules and becomes the fruit. Now, this is the one that usually contains what we call the ovules. And after reproduction, it becomes the fruit. Number 3 is the ovule. Again, ovule. Now, the ovule usually becomes the seeds when the sperm cells fertilize the egg cells. Now, this is the one that usually becomes the seeds after the sperm cells have finished fertilizing the egg cells. It becomes the seed. Now, I'll give you a simple exercise, and the simple exercise is about labeling the parts of a plant. Now, this is our plant. There are 4 major parts here: the stem, the root, the flower, and the leaves. I want us to label the different parts of the plant. For example, flower, we drag flower and drop it there. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.